Hey, hello, I'm Kråkan, also known as Kråkan, and welcome to Classic Movie Rambles, where I talk about old movies that I found in my closet while cleaning. This week's movie is Nausicaä, The Valley of the Wind, and it's a Studio Ghibli movie from 1984, and it's about 1 hour and 52 minutes long, and it has the WWF seal of approval. It's basically a worldwide foundation movie about environmental stuff. So the movie starts with the character of Yupa, and he's riding on a big bird in this apocalyptic landscape. He has a breathing mask on because he visits a village basically, which is filled with spores, and if you breathe in those spores, you kind of die a painful death. And he investigates the village and he's looking for survivors, but he doesn't find any, and then he moves on. And then an intro crawl, basically explaining exactly what happened. There was a war, and there's industry, and that led to the whole poisonous forest, which releases these spores, and there's like bugs that spread these spores, and people don't really know exactly what happened. And then cutting to the titular character of Nausicaä, and she lands her glider, this flying thing with a jet engine, and she goes into one of the poisonous forests, and she finds an omu shell, and this omu is like a big, super large caterpillar. But it's a shell, so she uses some gunpowder and a sword to cut out the eye socket of it, because it will be used for making powerful tools, basically. And then she hears a sound, and she goes investigating what it is, and she goes looking. And Yupa is hunted by a big living omu that's been enraged somewhat, and she uses a flash bomb, like a light bomb, and a bug whistle to basically draw the creature away. And then she talks to Yupa and basically tells him, bring him up to speed, and he shows her like a fox squirrel, which is this Japanese kind of creature, or from mythology, I guess. And he basically saves this little creature from death from the spore clouds, and it kind of runs up on Nausicaä, and it's angry and afraid. And she lets it bite her, and it realized that she is not a threat, and then they become best friends. And so Yupa asks Nausicaä what happened to her dad, how he's feeling and everything. Basically, Nausicaä's dad has been affected by the spores, and he's dying a slow and painful death. And she's kind of upset about this, but she welcomes Yupa to join her in the town later, and she flies on ahead. And later, Yupa arrives in the town, and the people greet him and everything, because he's this kind of famous swordsman as well, and he explores the land and whatnot. And we will get to a reason why in a bit. But anyway, he goes to speak to the king, Nausicaä's dad, and they have a discussion about how the world looks now and what he has discovered. So Yupa is basically out in the world looking to understand the poisonous forest, and that's why he's out there. He's trying to find a cause of it and trying to find a cure, but it's not going his way. And in this room is also this old lady. It's kind of like a witch, like a babushka or something, like in Russian kind of culture. Old granny. She's called Ubaba. And she tells Nausicaä this story about the Valley of the Wind and this legendary hero, almost like a Zelda kind of thing. But instead of a hero dressed in green, is actually dressed in light blue. And he kind of or Ubaba explains to him, to Nausicaä, the reason why Yupa is out doing these crazy things. And later, in the middle of the night, Nausicaä is awakened by one of her servants, and there's something foul in the wind. There is something blowing, and then there is a ship that flies over the valley. And something is not right, so she goes on her glider and kind of check out the situation. And she flies up to the glider and sees that the front windshield of it's covered with bugs. So the bugs are attacking the ship. And she can't really stop it, so the ship kind of crashes into the rock side and it explodes. And then she goes into the wreckage and kind of see if she can save some people from it. And she finds this girl that is mortally wounded and she's about to die. And this girl says, like, please burn the cargo, is very important, and then she dies. And then the people of the valley try to put out the fire and try to get rid of the spores that's been spreading all over the valley by the ship, because the Valley of the Wind, or the valley that they live in, is somehow it's kind of sealed off from the rest of the world in this kind of dystopian place. So there's no spores there, but now there's some spores in there. They have to take care of it. They try to put out the fires and try to get rid of the spores. But one of the bugs that were on this big flying ship is alive, and he's calling for his friends. So what happens is Nausicaä kind of uses a bug whistle to lure him away from the wreckage, and it kind of flies out in the desolated landscapes. And one of his bug friend is kind of funny, is waiting for him there, and they kind of fly and walk off together. And then the enemy forces are mobilizing. And what happens is on this ship that was chased was this big kind of monster warrior from an ancient war, basically, before the spores and everything. It's one of the reasons actually that the world is the way it is right now, but it's in an infant state, in like this fleshy kind of cocoon. It's actually kind of disgusting. But what happens is I think they just called Tumakians or something, this other kind of military force that they arrive there, and basically what happens is that they destroy the ground and they deploy their tanks, and then they go in there full force, and then they kill Nausicaä's father. And Nausicaä arrives, and she sees this, and she goes absolutely crazy, and she attacks the attackers, basically beats them up. And then she gets stopped by Yupa, because he's this sword master. He kind of blocks her sword with his hand, and he starts to bleed. And he says, like, now that's enough, no more fighting. And then they go back kind of to this. They go to the other scene where there's the military leader, and she's this woman, and she says that the only thing she wants is like peace, and she wants the war to end, and she wants to burn down the poison forest, which is kind of a bad thing, because if you burn down the forest, there's a chance of the spores actually spreading and more people getting infected. And it's like this thingy. It's also, if you shoot the bugs, they can kind of spread the spores onward because they live in the forest. So it's not a good plan. So what happens is that they take all the villagers' guns and everything, and so they're basically defenseless now against this threat. And then Obaba, the old lady, has nothing to lose, and she kind of, exactly what I told you, like she kind of expressed like why they can't burn down the forest and everything. And then she also tells the crowd that they want peace, but they've just killed our king, and the group of people kind of get upset about this. Excuse me. But then Nausicaä steps in between, because she doesn't want war and she doesn't want pain and suffering. She just said like, okay, we need to stop this. This has happened and we need to like deal with it. So they help the bad guys kind of take this ultimate warrior weapon and load it on to one of their ships, basically. And then the bad guys ready their ships to leave. And Yupa goes to see Nausicaä in her quarters, but she isn't there. So the fox squirrel that she saved from earlier is showing him a secret passage into Nausicaä's secret garden, where he finds her passed out. And he's kind of amazed, because she has been planting the poisonous spores in the dirt from or the sand from the underground spring, and somehow these plants aren't poisonous and the spores are fine. So it was actually technically humans that were poisoning the earth, and not like something else that happened. And she explains to Yupa that she did this to save her father, basically, but she was too late. He died anyway in vain. And the next day, Nausicaä is taken hostages on the Tumakian ships, as used as a bargaining ship, and she gets there are some sad kids there who give her some nutritious nuts. I thought that was funny, but in this desperation. And then this huge bulky Tumakian ships goes up into the air, basically. And what happens is that they get attacked by another smaller ship, by another rebelling nation, and the ships get taken down one by one because they aren't that mobile, but the fighter is. So what happens is that Nausicaä basically cries out to this fighter, and somehow this fighter actually sees her, and he gets shot down. But their ship is so badly damaged so that they have to go down. So they go to this on the back side, on the cargo compartment, and they use a smaller ship to get out, her and some other guys. And meanwhile this is happening, there are other hostages, these old men, they were tied up to a string to the Tamakian ships, and they were kind of crashed down in the poisonous spore jungle. So what happens is that they take this ship, but before it leaves, they take the main bad guy with them, this girl, this leader, and just so she survives, basically, because Nausicaä isn't cold-blooded like the rest. She just wants the end of all this, she doesn't want any bad things to happen. So meanwhile they're going down, they communicate with the other guys. They actually kind of catch up to them because they're gliding, and she tells them just go down and land, but they're hesitant because the force is full of bugs and everything. And she said, she takes off her breathing mask and she breathes the air, and they kind of put your mask back on, we do anything, just put your mask back on. And she just say land, and then they go down basically in this kind of swamp area kind of thing. And as they land, the main bad guy, the girl, pulls a gun on Nausicaä, and Nausicaä explains to her, we are in the bugs world now. Firing a gun, you will never know exactly what will happen. But she fires the gun anyway, and to one of the cargo ships just next to it, the hostage ship. And Nausicaä kind of says, what are you afraid of? You're acting like a scared fox. And then what happens is, there's some waves in the water, and this big creature that I talked about before, the Omu, the big caterpillars, they arise, and Nausicaä kind of approaches them, and the others are kind of scared because they don't really trust them. They're kind of scared of bugs, but Nausicaä is kind of openly minded, and she basically tells the creatures that they come in peace, and they have these small, I think they're called tendrils, light fiber optic almost kind of things, and they kind of feel her out. And she has a flashback to when she was a child, and she was out playing in some fields, and then they kind of understand that they're not bad guys, so they leave them alone. And then Nausicaä takes her glider out from one of the hostage ships. They hit it there basically, and she goes out, and she goes with the bugs to see where they're going because they're leaving. And then I think he's called Mindo. He just takes the gun from the bad guy because she's more or less paralyzed. And then Nausicaä goes away with the bug swarm. And then cutting to the boy in the fighter ship from a little bit earlier, and he is running for his life for all these bugs that are chasing him, and he falls off a cliff, and Nausicaä picks her up on her glider. But the glider gets hit by this kind of flying bug, and they kind of crash, and then she kind of passes out, and he kind of tries to save it because they're going down some quicksand, and there's another flashback of her as a child, and riding with her father basically, and the townspeople, and then cutting to her hiding something, and it's one of those small kind of bugs, and she doesn't want her father to kill it, but her father takes it from her, and she kind of cries, and please don't hurt it, she says. And then she wakes up from this dream that she've had, and they're basically under the poison forest, and the air is breathable down here because the old trees has basically filtered everything, and through the sand and everything, and basically there's clean water and clean air down here. And then the boy arrives with Nausicaä's glider, and they talk a bit, and then she walks around in this wondrous place, and for once she's happy about this. They're fine. They finally find some hope for their civilization basically. And then the boy helps Nausicaä fix her glider, and then they talk a bit, but then you also need to sleep because they're exhausted. And then cutting to the Valley of the Wind, where they're trying to restore the giant warrior from before, and the general gets informed that the queen's ship has basically crashed in the poisonous forest, and he tells these lieutenants don't tell the townspeople about this, but Yupa is there, and he overhears the discussion, And Yupa goes to their secret hideout, which is this old abandoned like tank, not a tank but a submarine. And at this point, the guys that were taken hostages by the queen is basically been taken the queen to this submarine. So she's there as a hostage, and she explains why she wants revenge on the bugs, because she lost most of her body parts to the bugs, and she just want to burn the forest down basically. And then Yupa leaves in an airship, and the queen actually escapes, and then Nausicaä and the boy flies over a desert because now the glider is fixed, and they go to to Aspel's hometown of Piet, which is this used to be a magnificent city, but when they arrive, it's a desolated place full of bugs and spores and everything. And then a big ship lands, and the Piet people, there's like the military and the civilians, and they talk to Nausicaä, and she gets upset about this because they just want to continue to kill people. They will try to take the giant warriors from the Tomakians and use it against them to basically wipe them out. And Nausicaä kind of protests, and she tries to go through a glider, but the guys kind of capture her and pushes her down, and she explains to them why they just can't burn the forest, because now they have evidence of the forest and everything. She tells the boy Aspel, like, tell him that what happened, and he kind of is against his own kind of superiors and everything. So what happens is he pulls a gun, and they kind of knock them all out, and they get taken hostages by the Piet kind of people on their ship. And then cutting to the main queen, as she has escaped, she sees that the Valley of the Wind people in the valley are rebelling against the soldiers, and that's what happened. There's like this big fight, but then what happens is that the spores has been spreading, so they kind of have to evacuate, and they don't have the tools and everything, so they have to like leave. And then Nausicaä later gets help to escape the airship that she is on, because the civilians on the ship, they're on her side. They don't want any more bloodshed and everything. Excuse me. They just want this whole thing to end. So they use a body double to switch places with her, and her and Aspel kind of escapes on the glider again. No, not on the glider, but on maybe the glider on the ship. I don't remember. But they escape, and they're basically under fire by the bad guys, the Tomakians again. And as Nausicaä tries to escape, she gets attacked by an enemy Tomakian fighter, but she is saved by Mito and Yupa. And then Yupa uses his sword skills to board the ship and defeat the enemy captain. And then Nausicaä and Mito rushes to the battlefield, because there's going to be a confrontation between the Valley of the Wind people and the Tomakians. And then they go down there, and basically they're on their way there. They're going full speed now, as fast as this craft can carry them. And what happens is that the old babushka character of Obaba goes out, and she feels like there's something raging and angry in the wind, and she's actually blind at this point. This is the point when I realized, okay, she can't see. Anyway, Nausicaä drops down from the clouds, and she sees there are hundreds of thousands of angry big Omu heading for the battlefield. And then the bad guys have captured one of the smaller Omu children, and they're basically using it to enrage the bigger Omus to kind of follow them to the battlefield. So there's three sides to this fight. There are the Pietians, so basically using this little Omu child to eradicate the Tomakians, and Tomakians are fighting against the Valley of the Wind people. So there's this big kind of at the end kind of fight about to happen. So what happens is Nausicaä tries to save this little Omu kid, and Mito kind of crash in the middle. And he tells both sides, the Valley of the Wind people and the Tomakian leaders rush to the center of this gathering. And Mito tells him, like, we don't have much time, and the Omus are here and they're on their way, and they're basically gonna kill us all. So Nausicaä uses her glider to basically to kind of cut down the Piet kind of flyers that are holding the Omu child, the Omu baby, or whatever it's called, and she gets fired at, but she lands on the hovercraft kind of thing, and it crashes, and she tries to save the baby because it's impaled by this nasty hooks, and the baby is kind of angry and scared, and the baby kind of just want to go to their parents, but there's like an acid sea because of the environmental things, so between the little baby and their parents. So what happens is that the baby tries to cross into the acid water, but Nausicaä stops the baby, and she gets pulled down into the acid and she gets burned, and then the little Omu baby, kind of bleeding and everything, feels sympathy, because I think these kind of bug creatures have some kind of telepathy or something, so it realizes like, okay, she's hurt, we need to just stop right here. So what happens is, after then, the Omu child kind of comforts her and everything, and then the war starts. The Tamakians bring out the giant warrior, basically, and it fires upon the attacking Omus and it kind of disintegrates them. But the thing is that this giant warrior was in this cocoon kind of flesh kind of pod, and it wasn't really hatched yet, so it's just kind of like, it's not done yet, it's like a half-baked kind of cake, so it fires a bunch of shots at the Omus, and it kind of breaks apart like this big gooey kind of nasty thing. And then Nausicaä flies with the Omu baby to the middle of the battlefield, and she tries to stop the Omu, and she stands her ground, but she gets flinged up into the air, and then all of everything just stops, and the smoke kind of clears. And at this point, Nausicaä is dead, and the Omu child kind of arrives and goes up to Nausicaä and kind of feels her out with the small kind of fiber optics kind of tendrils, and the rest of the Omus kind of do the same thing, and they revive her because they realize what she's done. She's trying to unite everybody, no matter where they are from and everything, and she gets revived, and there's this heartbreaking scene, and everybody kind of realize what they've done wrong and everything, and the Omus creatures kind of go back to the forest and they leave, and the Tamakians say their piece, and there's a lot of goodbyes and the war is over. And then they cutting back to the Valley of the Wind people rebuilding their paradise, basically away from the spores and everything, and trying to rebuild everything. And then cutting to the sand, one of the sand pits beneath one of the poison forests, where there's actually one branch growing, and there's hope and life again. There's basically hope. So what do I think about this movie? I think it's a really good movie, but it has this kind of environmental kind of talk that no one actually takes seriously nowadays and ever did. I mean, this movie was released in '84, so that's almost like 40 years ago, and people are still killing each other, don't care about the environment, and how, I mean, some do. I mean, I'm just generalizing everything, but so I think this movie has a really nice kind of thing, like, you have to at least try to make a difference. You have to do something, even if it's just a little bit, just try to do something. Just be nice to people, try not to litter around, throw your garbage in the trash, try to do something good. Try to be a better person, because we need to have some hope for our children and the future of everything. But anyway, thanks for watching and take care.